Blackened Teeth is a 2021 horror novella by Cassandra Khaw. It was nominated for several awards in 2021 and 2022, including the Bram Stoker Award nominee for Best Long Fiction, World Fantasy Award nominee for Novella, and Shirley Jackson Award nominee for Novel, and Ignite Award nominee for Best Novella. So, I've read this one before. Listen. In doing this channel, 95% of what I've reviewed thus far has been stuff I'm reading for the first time. William was the only book before this one that I'd read previously. I feel like I end up not liking a lot of these books, and I swear I plan on doing reviews and recommendations for more books that I enjoyed. But today I'm rehashing this one, in more detail than usual at that. I really wanted to analyze why I didn't like this book. One, because it's not that long and therefore not as torturous to read again. And two, because despite all those award nominations, Nothing But Blackened Teeth has gotten abysmal reviews. As of this video, the Goodreads rating sits at 2.64, which is actually a 0.01 drop from what it was when I was originally drafting my notes for this. So mixed to negative ratings kind of dominate this book. 78% of reviewers gave this novella a 3-star rating or lower. Gonna be 100% with you, the cover betrayed me. I mean, Jesus Christ, look at it! It's so fucking beautiful. When I tell you that I was so disappointed by what this book delivered me just based off of what the cover low-key promised me, it hurts. So why exactly did Nothing But Blackened Teeth disappoint me so much? We start off with 5 friends: Kat, Philip, Faiz, Talia, and Lynn. They all lived in Malaysia together and have a history of investigating creepy and haunted places. I'm not entirely clear on how long they've all known each other. Kat mentions them all being a group at 16, but I believe she mentions knowing Faiz longer than the others. Faiz and Talia are now getting married, and Philip, the rich boy of the group, has rented out a legit Heian-era mansion in Japan, which he intends to marry them in. I guess he has the requisite permissions to officiate weddings, although he doesn't have permission for them to be inside of the mansion. They have access to the grounds, they are not supposed to be in the mansion. The dynamics of the group are messy. Kat, our protagonist, was semi-recently hospitalized for depression. It's not clear exactly how recently. That's a theme with this book. The timeline is really messy. Philip is a rich boy that brings up his inheritance a lot, which Faiz resents. Talia resents Kat because her and Faiz's relationship used to be a lot more volatile, and Kat, quote, insisted that the two break up because they were clearly not having a good time with one another. Additionally, Kat and Faiz dated for about 2.5 seconds, and Talia has thus concluded that Kat wants to get back with him. Kat does not. She's implied to have a thing for Lynn, who is now married to a woman that Kat has presumably never met, because he not only didn't invite her to the wedding, he also did not tell her he was getting married at all. Lynn's only coming to the wedding to see Kat. He clearly doesn't like Philip and Talia, and doesn't even really remember who Faiz is. Also, Philip and Talia, the bride, dated briefly as well, and they don't want Faiz to know. They low-key flirt a lot throughout this book. Oof, that's a lot. Incidentally, I've just described half of what this book is dedicated to telling us. So they show up at this Heian-era mansion so that Faiz and Talia can elope, with Philip officiating. It's right after Kat, Philip, and the couple show up that Philip drops the alleged lore of the mansion that they're in. He doesn't actually know the name of the place, but supposedly, a long time ago, there was supposed to be a wedding there. Except the groom died on the way, and the bride was so distraught that she asked to be buried alive in the foundation of the house. This then led to a new girl being buried alive in the house's foundation or walls every year after. For context, the Heian period in Japan lasted from about 794 AD to 1185 AD, so we're potentially talking about hundreds, maybe even 1,000 plus girls in the mansion's floors and walls. This practice is referred to as Hitobashira. The four snipe at each other for a bit until Lynn shows up. Then they all eat dinner. After dinner, Talia suggests that they engage in a sort of ritual contest called Hyaku Monogatari Kaidankai. I think I said that correctly. I don't know. I'm American. At the bare minimum, I've got a heavy accent on that. There are 100 lit candles, and everyone has to tell ghost stories without flinching, and then they blow out the candles one by one until none are left. It's supposed to invite spirits into the house. Up until this point, Kat has been hearing a voice repeating a certain Japanese phrase over and over again. Suenu Matsuyama Nami mo koenamu? I think that's how you say it. I'm going to get into it in the analysis, but there's ambiguous information suggesting that Kat is either hallucinating or actually seeing the ghost bride. It's not 100% clear exactly which one it is, initially. Kat, drunk by the time they get down to the last candle, tells a story to the effect of a bunch of dumb 20-somethings go to a haunted mansion and summon a bunch of ghosts, and the lights go out. Talia goes running out into the mansion to investigate. Eventually, she comes running to find them all and leads them through parts of the mansion that didn't seem to exist before, which sets off some red flags. Lynn and Kat end up going outside, they have a moment, and then they go back inside to find Talia dressed up in a veil and a dead woman's wedding outfit, with Philip getting ready to do the wedding. Everyone argues. Talia says she wants Kat and Lynn gone. Middle. Lynn ends up ripping Talia's veil off, revealing that she's been possessed, replaced by an Ohaguro Batari. An Ohaguro Batari is a yokai. Describing the exact nature of a yokai is a little tricky, because apparently the word's been used to describe mythological creatures, supernatural beings and entities, and ghosts. They've also been described as or compared to demons, but from what I can tell, yokai aren't always malicious. Sometimes they're nice, sometimes they're not. It depends entirely on what we're talking about. The Ohaguro Batari, specifically, is a yokai of a beautiful young woman in a wedding outfit who seems normal until you get too close. Then you realize that she has no eyes or nose, only a mouthful of blackened teeth. That's literally what Ohaguro Batari translates to. Nothing but blackened teeth.
There it is!
Kat only just now realizes that the phrase she's been hearing repeated multiple times translates to, "If I were the one that had a heart that would cast you aside and turn to someone else, then waves would rise above the pines of Suenomatsu Mountain." Supposedly this is a real phrase used in Japan, but I don't know how widely or currently it's used. The only evidence I could really find of its existence independent of this book was on a Reddit post. However, I am American. I don't speak Japanese. It's entirely possible that there are Japanese sources that I'm just not hooking up to because I don't understand the language. Faiz punches the Ohaguro Batari in the face and it disappears. The mansion, which has paintings of yokai all over the walls, starts basically coming to life. The yokai paintings start moving and whispering, and when Kat goes to drink some water, it's turned dark and salty and has human hair in it. Ew. Kat says that they need to leave. Faiz says no, they need to rescue Talia. He even goes so far as to volunteer as a sacrifice to be buried in the walls or floor. Then he insists that there has to be a book that can solve this in the library. So they go to the library and, oh, look at that, there's a book in the library with the solution that only Faiz can read. How very convenient. The solution, incidentally, is to make 4 sacrifices. Blood, bone, organ, and, reproductive material, if you catch my drift. An argument breaks out, and Faiz fatally stabs Philip. It's basically agreed upon by Lynn and Kat that this was an excuse to attack a man he already hated. Kat then gets the bright idea to use Philip's organs and bones as part of the sacrifice, and whoop-de-doo, Talia magically reappears as Philip dies. They burn down the mansion and tell the cops it was all an accident. I suppose I'm meant to just assume that the Japanese government prosecuted these stupid tourists for accidentally burning down a potentially 1,000-year-old historical relic that you technically weren't even supposed to be in, because I don't know how this wouldn't turn into a massive international scandal even independent of Philip's death. Okay, so usually when I'm reviewing a book, I start off with the writing, but there's actually something about this book I want to start with first, and that is the back cover of my copy of this book, which has several blurbs and quotes on it. We start off with an unattributed quote that I assume is meant to be the publisher's opinion of this book, which reads, "Masterfully turning the classic haunted house story on its head, Nothing But Blackened Teeth is a sharp and devastating exploration of grief, the parasitic nature of relationships, and the consequences of our actions." Okay, what grief? What grief is in this book? Are they speaking colloquially, like good grief, as in the sense that Kat's friends are causing her grief? Because I really didn't see anything resembling grief in this book until the very end. I'm gonna get into how poorly the relationships in this book are written, but the book would have been significantly better if more work had been put into developing these characters through their former love for one another, rather than just having them be bitchy at one another for the entire book. Another point, the parasitic nature of relationships. Okay, fine, yeah, these guys definitely didn't come across as friends. They did come across as parasites on each other's lives. And the consequences of our actions, again, really need to hone in on the part where, what's the Japanese government doing about the tourists who burned down a potentially 1,000-year-old mansion? Just throwing that out there. Then there are the 10 blurbs. 5 of these are by authors that I have never read before. 1 is by an author I have read and enjoyed before. The remaining 4 are by an author I'm iffy on, and 3 are by authors that I hate and whose books I refuse to spend my money on. I will leave it up to your imagination which is which. So first we have, I believe it's pronounced Shannon Maguire. Beautiful and brutal and heartbroken. Absolutely recommended. Not sure where we're getting heartbroken from, but okay. T. Kingfisher. Delicate and disgusting. Okay, not really a comment about that. Stephen Graham Jones. This is Hill House for this century. Keep Shirley Jackson's name out your fucking mouth. Especially in connection to this bitch-ass book. We have Christopher Golden, who says mesmerizing. Debatable. Kevin Hearn? I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. I loved every sharp, delicious twist of it. I would not call this sharp, I would call it mind-numbing, but, to each their own. Richard Kadri leaves you reeling but wanting more. Yeah, what I wanted more of was the ghost murdering people. I would really, really have enjoyed watching the Ohaguro Batari murder these motherfuckers. Would have loved that a lot more. I craved a lot more of that. I have never wanted anything less of what this book was in my entire life. Josh Mallerman says, Khaw's got a sterling premise, enduring lore, and fresh talent to voice it. You know what? Actually, I do agree with you. This was a great premise. But enduring lore? What lore? Is it the part where the author took an established Japanese legend, used it as set dressing for a weak plot, and then did nothing with it? I'm going to get into the actual lore of the Ohaguro Batari in a second. Just stay with me. Keish Johnson? I think that's how you say it. Compulsively readable. It's a novella, so yeah, I guess you could say it's readable. Brian Evanson, the kind of story you lose sleep over. I mean, probably not in the way that he means it. C.S.E. Cooney says magnificently rotten. Yeah, again, not in the way that I would say it. This book is a prime example of why I never take book blurbs seriously. Like, ever. If I ever somehow become a successful author, I think I might just, flat out refuse to blurb other people's books, because if I end up hating something, I don't think I have it in me to be like, I don't think I'd be able to hide the fact that I don't like it. Alright, on to the writing. So Cassandra Khaw is known for writing a lot of purple prose. I haven't read any of this author's other books, but I have glanced at the reviews for them, and a consistent criticism shows up to the effect of, this author loves $10 words and shouldn't be allowed to use as a thesaurus anymore. Obviously, having not read any of their other books, I can't rightly say whether or not that criticism is overblown, and I will say that this book wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, but realistically, I don't even know if I'll clock the worst book I've ever read once I actually read it. Here are some examples of the prose. Page 16. She and I made eye contact as the boys bantered, their voices prickling like the hackles of a Doberman, short and stark, animosity panting between the niceness, and Talia's expression congealed with dislike. Page 25. 1 girl each year, 206 bones times 1,000 years. More than enough calcium to keep this house standing until the stars ate themselves clean, picked the sinew from their own shining bones. I don't even get this metaphor. If stars don't eat themselves, they don't have bones. I don't get it. On page 71, I leaned into a direction and counted how long it took before the amygdala called timeout on my chicanery. Holy hell. The amygdala is the part of the brain that controls your emotions, and chicanery is deception by way of trickery or subterfuge. For context, Lynn is holding her arm to stop her from following Talia, so I don't see how this is a trick. I don't see why Kat's amygdala would be doing anything. I don't get it. Page 92. Faiz somnambulated through phrases. My brother in Christ, just say sleepwalked. Page 106. On the walls, the yokai dance like they invented the idea, pirouetting through genres and periods, Nara to Muromachi, every shogunate of literati painting, austere to aureate, 12 bodies to a cosmic tango. I understood that sentence through the word Muromachi, but every shogunate of literati painting, austere to aureate, 12 bodies to a cosmic tango is where I throw my fucking hands up and say, I don't know what the fuck that means. There's an important distinction to be made between purple prose and complex, elaborate writing styles. I have read loads of books that use complex words and phrases or were written with a certain poetic flourish, and I love them, or at least I didn't mind them. Purple prose is, by definition, characterized by overdramatic and excessive word choice, which means that you're spending more time focused on understanding the prose than you are the story. The key is not to have every other word in the book be the most elaborate synonym you can look up, and also to understand that not every single sentence in your book needs to be poetic. Now, some people like purple prose. If you do, good for you. But a lot of people don't like it, and I am one of them. For most of this book, the word choice is unnecessarily flowery and complicated. Except when Lynn's talking. Then it's all about fucking ghosts and plums, but we're gonna get to that. Don't you fucking fret. The main terror of this novel is supposed to be the ghost bride, the Ohaguro Batari. And God, what a premise. A woman allows herself to be buried alive, and then young women are sacrificed similarly every year afterwards. Rife with possibilities for horror. And yet, the execution was just not it for me. First, the majority of the book was dedicated to the interpersonal dramas between the cast, which was boring and underdeveloped as it is. Very little of it was dedicated to anything horrifying. I need to stress that it isn't entirely clear whether or not Kat is imagining the Ohaguro Batari, or if she's actually seeing it, because she doesn't really react to it, nor does she express any real fear of it. Things really don't kick off until the Ohaguro Batari shows itself for the first time on page 79. And then afterwards, the only person who seems to be able to see it is Kat, who, again, expresses no fear towards it. This book, in my opinion, was just not scary. It had the potential to be for about 2.5 seconds, and then it proceeded to disappoint me. Second, I need to get into that enduring lore that I quoted Josh Malerman as praising, because Cassandra Khaw did not create any enduring lore. So when I was researching the Ohaguro Batari for this review, a few things popped out to me. First, this particular yokai is seen as a prankster, not as a malevolent spirit. Yokai.com even specifically says that this yokai isn't dangerous. Mostly the Ohaguro Batari goes around scaring the shit out of people and then laughing when they run away screaming. Second, it's just kind of its own thing, really. The Ohaguro Batari isn't attached to a specific legend or historical event that I could find. I looked at a couple of other places aside from yokai.com. I could not pin down whether or not this particular yokai has a generally accepted origin story or not. Now, where this book is concerned, obviously that doesn't necessarily matter. You can make anything scary if you want to, and if you want to attach a particular backstory or lore to a notorious yokai or urban legend, you're allowed to do that. Creativity is a thing. But if you're going to do that, you need to put the legwork in to develop my understanding of what you're working with here. You don't need to turn to the screen and read me the Wikipedia article on what an Ohaguro Batari is, but if you're going to use the term, give me something about what it is or what Japanese culture understands it to be. Imagine writing a horror book about the Fae, or about vampires, or if we want to get into something thematically similar to the Ohaguro Batari, Ginny Greenteeth from English folklore, and then the characters never delve into any of their pre-existing knowledge about what these creatures are or how to combat them. They clearly know what these creatures are, but the recognition that they're dealing with a creature they recognize from popular or local legend never actually comes up. I realize now that in my recap I've actually neglected something important. Kat is a student of Japanese literature. She knows some Japanese, and she clearly knows what an Ohaguro Batari is. She is the one who tells us this term. She actually mentions its name out of nowhere on page 63, long before we actually see it for real. She never mentions what it is or how she knows what it is. Kat should have been the best person in this cast to slip in some covert details about what we're dealing with, especially since the other members of the cast clearly don't. Kat should be the first one asking, wait, an Ohaguro Batari? Well, that kind of makes sense given the mansion's history, but usually they don't kidnap or possess people? She comes so close to giving us a hint on page 100 when she suggests that maybe all the yokai wanted was for us to panic, kick around a few old books, cry, and then they'd let us out with Talia a little worse for wear. Because now we have a hint about the nature of yokai, the possibility that they could just be fucking with these idiots. Because again, not all yokai are dangerous or malicious. Some of them are just pranksters. Some of them are just jerks. But then she turns around and says, if Faiz is right, if the myths are true, Talia lay buried with every dead girl to have been entombed in this place. How many minutes and how many hours before she suffocated on soil? This is again where I kind of have to throw up my hands and start asking what the fuck is going on. We have a dead woman who voluntarily entombed herself in the house's foundation. Okay, gotcha. Then we have sacrifices of women every year in a similar fashion. Got it. We now have a woman, Talia, who tried to get married in this mansion, who has disappeared, and was briefly replaced by the Ohaguro Batari. Gotcha. Please point out to me the part where we must now conclude that the Ohaguro Batari has buried Talia in the walls of the fucking floor. Again, Ohaguro Batari are, as per Japanese folklore, not inherently dangerous. I saw no references to them eating people or killing people. They scare people, they don't kill them. Kat should know this since she is the first person to bring up what an Ohaguro Batari is. If she knows the name, she has to know at least a little about their lore, or at least enough to know that this one is deviating from that lore. This would be the time for her to speak up and say, hey, I actually know a little bit about this topic. What's more, the women who were killed after the bride entombed herself were buried in the walls and potentially the floors. This would imply that the living were the ones making the sacrifices. If Philip had said that one woman a year disappeared every year after the bride entombed herself, I could have said, okay, the ghost is taking them. But the sacrifices are strongly implied to have been made by living people. So again, why are we assuming that Talia has been buried alive? How do we know she isn't knocked out or tied up in another room? We don't know of the Ohaguro Batari kidnapping girls before, so why would she start now? Is she pissed off that another woman tried to get married in her house? Is this even the spirit of the actual bride we're dealing with? Or is it an Ohaguro Batari entirely unrelated to her that's just popping up and fucking with the cast because of the house's history? None of those questions are even asked. The author said, this is what I'm doing, and never bothers to have Kat even venture a guess as to why any of it's happening. I am just so annoyed at how underutilized Kat's knowledge of Japanese literature, culture, and folklore was here. This was a perfect opportunity for her to take action and explain what they might be dealing with, and instead she's a passive observer for the most part. Have her looking in the library for hints. She knows best where to look and what to look for. I also wanted to just cry at the fucking missed opportunity here. It could have all been a trick. Spiriting Talia away, Faiz finding that convenient book and being the only one who can read it, incidentally. And everything that happens after? My opinion of this book would have gone up considerably if it turned out to be one big joke that the yokai were pulling. Talia was never in danger, Faiz's rage got stoked over nothing, which means Philip died for even less of a reason than he already did, and so the characters have to contend with the fact that their own stupid, reckless behavior and simmering hatred for one another is what led to Philip's death. And again, I really need to restate that this book really should have ended with major consequences for the main characters. You are all tourists. Faiz is half Japanese, and Kat might be a student in Japan, but they were all apparently friends while living as teenagers in Malaysia, so I'm assuming that none of them are Japanese citizens. But you're all basically tourists, and you accidentally burned down a historical relic that you technically weren't supposed to be in because you were drunk? And there are no consequences for this? A police investigation is all that's mentioned. But how are you not getting doxxed on social media? How are you not getting shredded for behaving like the worst example of rich, stupid, spoiled tourists? How are you not being brought up on charges or sued? Does Japan not body people who damage or destroy historical and cultural sites?
They do, by the way. They absolutely fucking do.
On to the characters. These people are not friends. I refuse to believe that they were ever friends. When I say that there is no development of this group's chemistry or history, I mean that there is none. I don't know how they met beyond the fact that they lived in the same country. I don't know how they all ended up learning that they enjoyed haunted houses and haunted places, and I don't know why the fuck any of them cared at all about one another at some point. And this is important information that I need to know, because when this story starts, these motherfuckers hate each other for the most part. Talia hates Kat, Faiz hates Philip, Kat hates Talia, Lynn hates fucking everyone except for Kat. Kat doesn't hate Philip, but apparently a relationship between them ended badly or awkwardly, and she whines about how tired she is of him apologizing because, and I quote, apologies don't exonerate the sinner, they only compelled graciousness from the recipient. Except that 5 pages later, Talia is pissed off that Kat is attending her wedding because Kat tried to break her and Faiz up a while back, and Kat insists that, quote, I've apologized, I've tried to make it up to you. Girlie, did you just not say that apologies didn't exonerate the person apologizing, only guilt-trip the recipient into being gracious? Same shit with Lynn. He ghosted her too, didn't even invite her to his wedding or tell her that he was getting married, but Kat accepts his apology pretty much immediately and with no conditions. Despite the fact that Talia, Faiz, and Philip were there for her when she needed them, and he wasn't. Meanwhile, Philip dies while everyone's paying attention to Talia coming back after the sacrifice being made. Kat was the only one who even sorta kinda gave a shit when he got stabbed, and still the man gets to bleed out all alone. I don't buy these people as friends, and I don't buy it because the author did not put in the legwork to convince me that they ever were. Which brings me to the characters who, for the most part, were one-dimensional cardboard cutouts. Kat was obnoxious. I know she's 24, depressed, likes haunted houses, and studies Japanese literature. That's about it. It really doesn't run that deep. And I know it's more the author's writing than it is Kat's internal monologue, but the purple prose had a way of making her sound obnoxiously pretentious. I was annoyed that she whined about Philip's repeated apologies and then whined that Talia wasn't accepting her apology or how she immediately accepted Lynn's. Was Philip's ghosting somehow more painful or worse than not even being told that your friend was getting married? Philip was a rich white boy who apparently wears his Letterman jacket into his 20s. He is, I guess, an ordained priest? I don't fucking know. Also, he might be banging Talia. I don't fucking know. He also likes playing the hero, according to Kat, although I'm not sure why that's framed as being a bad thing when everybody else is being about as useful as a splinter on a fucking railing. I suspect that the author wanted me to dislike Philip more than I did, since almost everyone in this book takes the piss out of him constantly. But I would argue he was actually one of the more tolerable characters in this book. Not that that is a high bar to climb over. Faiz was hollow. I know so little about him beyond being Talia's fiancé, the fact that they used to fight a lot, and the fact that he's friends with Kat. Also that he dated Kat. Personality traits, didn't really see any. He's mostly passive until he goes nuts over Talia's disappearance, and then he murders Philip. Which doesn't come across entirely out of nowhere, I'll grant you, because they do hint ahead of time that it might not be a good idea for Faiz to find out that Philip and Talia were together once. Talia was a bitch. That's how she's portrayed anyway. I have to give her that if Kat really did interfere with their relationship or put effort into breaking them up, I would understand not wanting her at the wedding. However, I don't know how true that is, nor do I know how recent it is. What little information I've been given on these characters is really, really hard to pin down on a timeline. But yeah, Talia was portrayed as a vengeful bitch, and that's all I can say about her. And then there's Lynn. Sweet fucking Christ, I hated Lynn. He was such a massive prick. The only person he cared about was Kat, despite the fact that he ghosted her and never even told her he was getting married. Never reached out when she was going through a hard time. Then he shows up at the mansion and proceeds to act like the most smug, self-centered, know-it-all prick. He is so maliciously pleased to see Philip and Faiz hating each other for no reason. I have zero context for why that attitude would be justified and not just Lynn being a piece of trash. Philip and Faiz, by the way, were groomsmen at his wedding. So, and apparently that doesn't mean anything. At one point, Lynn actually has the fucking gall to refer to himself as the comic relief in this book, except he isn't funny, he's an asshole. And I need you to understand exactly how much I fucking hate people who don't know the difference between being funny and being an asshole. But for context, here are two examples of Lynn's best material. Example 1, page 83. Which, I can tell you now, worries me because that sounds like a recipe for an angry fucking ghost. He paused. Or angry ghost fucking. Example 2, on page 91. He's crazy, plum stirring mad, although I suppose anyone who was forced to stir plums for hours would go mad. Is that how the line goes? Plum stirring mad, plum mad? I don't know, it's such a weird whatchamacallit. Don't you? Ow! I assume that this is meant to imply that Kat's elbowed him since she starts speaking next, but I have zero evidence of this, no explanation given. That's the theme with this book. Lynn is not funny. He's not funny. At all. He is annoying, he is obnoxious, he is unbearable, and not just because he's a jerk who isn't funny, but also because half of his role in this book is breaking the fourth wall and pointing out that they're in a horror movie. Page 65, Kat, this is literally the part where the supporting cast dies horribly. You're bisexual, I'm the comic relief, it's gonna be one of us. God, if only. Page 82, told you she was probably going to be possessed and everything was going to go to hell, Lynn said, more satisfied maybe than anyone had a right to be. Yes, because that's a normal reaction to finding an actual, literal yokai in front of you, when I have no evidence that you and the rest of the fucking Scooby-Doo crew have ever found a single ghost before. Page 88. Yeah, that's you. Go ahead and stay, I guess, but this is when the murders start. You know this is when the murders start. Don't threaten me with a good time, Lynn. My ranting in this section is primarily about Lynn, but I do need to mention for clarity that Kat also breaks the fourth wall. She does it twice. On page 52 in her internal monologue, she says, "This was a haunting, a possession, and any second now I'd cut my throat, the first casualty of the night. After all, isn't that the foremost commandment in the scripture of horror? They who are queer, deviant, tattooed, tongue-pierced other must always die first." Kat, honey, baby girl, as a bisexual woman, I would have been 100% okay with you, a bisexual main character, getting chomped by the Ohaguro Batari. Frankly, my opinion of this book would only have improved. On page 89, in berating Philip, Kat says, "And if you two start fighting, who the fuck is going to do the rescuing? Isn't that your job? You're the all-star quarterback, aren't you? The hero?"
My sister in Christ, you are all in your 20s and no one talks like this.
When people complain about Marvel movies being too quippy and snarky and having too much banter, this is the kind of shit they're talking about. Turning towards the camera and acknowledging that this is a horror movie scenario once is funny. When you do it multiple times, I'm getting ready to throw the book, especially since it's tonally inconsistent with the rest of the story. If this was a black comedy, I would be more forgiving, but it's not. It fundamentally is not. There was one quote from Lynn that just really set me off on page 75. Faiz and Talia, it's actually the Ohaguro Batari, are getting ready to get married, and Philip insists that everyone stays until after the wedding and that everything's going to be fine. From here I quote, "Spoken like a true white guy," says Lynn. Ignoring everything that Kat said, how does any of this seem like a good idea? Even assuming that it's all just the delusions of an incredibly drunk mind, this is just plain weird. How the fuck does any of this make sense to you people? 1. Yes, Philip is white, except that Talia is half Bengali and Telugu, and Faiz is half Japanese. I don't recall if any other heritage was mentioned, though his name is of Arabic origin. So if we're going for a dumb white people not recognizing that supernatural shit is happening trope, you've already failed because you have two non-white characters going along with it too. And don't forget that Kat and Lynn are both Chinese, and we're also part of this ghost hunting group as teenagers, so apparently you're all perfectly fine with fucking with the supernatural regardless of ethnicity. The joke falls flat. 2. Lynn was friends with these people as a teenager. Kat said that all 5 of them used to look for ghosts in haunted houses and abandoned buildings and in back alleyways. How is this love and acceptance of the macabre and tasteless suddenly shocking to him? This is literally what you all used to do all the time. 3. There are 2 lines being crossed here. 1, that the group is in a mansion that they technically aren't supposed to be in. Again, Philip has a permit for the land, not for the mansion. And 2, that Talia is wearing a dress that doesn't belong to her and that she, likely procured from the mansion. What else has everyone seen? What else would be a red flag? Okay, the lights went off after telling ghost stories. So what? No one else has reported seeing anything weird. In fact, Philip actually comes right out and says that no one has seen the ghost bride. So yeah, it seems perfectly reasonable to me that the 3 other people in the room would brush Kat off. She is extremely drunk and, by the way, is in hot shit with the bride for trying to break her and the groom up in the past. I simply can't imagine why she wouldn't be taken seriously, especially considering that this is a group that has a history of hunting ghosts and is a nerd against creepy shit. I was rooting for the Ohaguro Batari. Fuck the lore, let her eat these morons. She deserves a treat. So, yeah, I did not like this novella. It, for me, falls apart on every single level. The writing, the characters, the relationship between the characters, the horror, it just did not fucking work for me. And apparently almost half of the people who left a rating on Goodreads agree with me. If you want something that actually takes a concept like this and does it better, try Koji Suzuki's Ring or Rin Shupeiko's The Girl from the Well. They're both based off of a Japanese legend about a girl named Okiku, and they're just so much better. They take elements of the original story and lore, although there are variations, and they make it into something new and interesting to read, and I just highly recommend them. So yeah, not a fan of nothing but Blackened Teeth. I might check out more of Cassandra Khaw's stuff to see if maybe she improved over time or something like that. I don't know. I might, but this one was a dud for me.